we are now, I mean, technically, I guess we are now 3 full Tuesdays away from Election Day. That's how close we are, less than 4 weeks. And here in the great state of Ohio, early voting begins today. There are already people in line to vote early at some of the local, I guess, the local Board of Election in Lucas County. I don't know how it works this year. I'm not an early voter guy, but I saw lines. Some of the pictures that the Blade covered and some of the TV stations had. That's why I got the expert, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, joining me on the Scott Sands Show. Frank, it's great to have you back on.
Well, and thank you, sir. And yeah, our prayers go out to folks in Florida. And well, maybe this is a reminder to those Ohioans that moved down there why they ought to come back to Ohio. Well,
could be. I know. I've heard from a few people. Few people have come back up just to get away. So before we get into Ohio voting, and by the way, this is a good reason to have early voting because you never know what's going to happen in 4 weeks. It may prevent you from getting out on Election Day. But if you were Secretary of State in somewhere like North Carolina or Georgia, Florida, what would you be doing? How would you be concerned that people may not be able to vote after a storm like this or Hurricane Helene moves through?
Probably heard my old military wisdom from the Army that you sweat in training so you don't bleed in battle. That means you do the prep work ahead of time. You think of what potential things could impact Election Day, and you build in place mitigation plans for that. We do that in Ohio with things that could happen like power outages, thunderstorms, tornadoes, that kind of thing. Certainly our counterparts in other states plan for the kind of natural disasters that they could face. One of the good things about elections administration, though, is how decentralized it is. It truly is run at the local level. Resourceful local elections officials have plans in place for things like this. And I'll say that I've reached out to my counterparts in Tennessee and North Carolina to talk with them about, are there things we can help you with? For example, it takes a certain stock of paper were destroyed. We may have some excesses. Of course, we're going to make sure Ohio has plenty first, but if we have excess, we could probably share that with our friends in the affected states and that kind of thing. But it's about exercising the plans that you have in place and making sure that you're ready for that. It may require an additional effort by the voters in those states, right? Maybe your polling location was destroyed, and so it's going to move to a different location down the street or something like that. But first and foremost, it's making sure that people are okay and infrastructure is put back in place. But you're right, 27 days from now, or as we would say in the Army, 27 days and a wake up, that's Election Day, and they're going to make sure that people have the chance to vote in those affected states.
I mean, it seems to me like in places like the Asheville, North Carolina area that there is no school gymnasium in many cases. Could we have semi trucks, 18-wheelers with voting machines on there, portable voting machines, to try to get out to some of these isolated communities where people may not have the opportunity to vote, and especially without, there's really no mail infrastructure right now. There's no internet. There's no cell service in some areas. This is not really in your purview, but just trying to think and especially, you're looking at North Carolina, Georgia, swing states where every vote's going to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they'll identify locations to run voting in that haven't been destroyed, maybe the local fire station, for example, or something else like that they can use. And but this is also a reminder why you shouldn't procrastinate. Don't wait until Election Day. If you've got your minds made up, go ahead and participate in early voting. That's underway now in Ohio. Absentee voting is underway. Things happen, and people need to go ahead and take advantage of the opportunities they have to cast their ballot right now.
Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose here on the Scott Sands Show. So voter registration ended yesterday. How did the state do? Did you notice any trends, any changes in voter registration levels?
Well, we saw the kind of steady participation in voter registration that we expected. We didn't hit the all-time high. That was actually in 2020. It was the cutoff day in 2020 that hit about 58,000. Last I checked in with my team, we had about 50,000 online voter registrations. We won't know for another couple of days how many paper forms came into the county boards of elections. But you're right, voter registration ended yesterday. Early voting began today. And we can expect there's going to be steady turnout for early voting today, maybe tomorrow. It'll probably, quiet down a little bit after that and then pick back up in the final week. Those are sort of predictable patterns. And so if you time it right, when you get down to your Board of Elections, you probably won't impact any kind of lines or that kind of thing, as long as you plan accordingly.
And you also went through a purge, a small purge of voters, which your opponents and some people have said was illegal, but necessary and something that every state, frankly, should do.
Yeah, this is also predictable. This time of year, the hand wringers and the alarmists come out. They generally have a partisan motivation for doing so. They hold their silly press conferences and accuse me of all kinds of things that aren't actually true. Here's the thing. We are going to maintain accurate voter rolls. That means that we follow the law. We remove those that have died. We remove non-citizens that shouldn't be registered to vote in the first place. We make sure that when people have moved out of state that they're removed from the voter rolls. And so, we're not purging voters. We're getting bad data out of the voter rolls. And that's what Ohioans expect. I follow the law as it relates to this, and I don't apologize for taking dead voters off the voter rolls. That's what Ohioans expect me to do.
We had a question come in for you, Frank. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose on the Scott Sands Show. As we're talking about early voting, this question came in off of our talkback microphone.
Scott, this is a question for Frank LaRose. Why do we indiscriminately mail requests for absentee ballots to everybody and his brother? Shouldn't it be that if somebody wants an absentee ballot, they would request it? I got one in the mail. There was no need for it, so it was disposed of properly in my shredder. I think it just gives another way for people to cheat. Thanks.
All right, I hope you heard that entire question. We've got new equipment in here in our Hinsville studios. I'm not sure if I fed the audio down to you or not.
No, I heard it just fine. And so it's important to note that those are just request forms. It's just a blank form. You can print those off from our website. You can pick them up from a library. You can get your absentee ballot request form wherever you want to. You still have to fill it out with the last four of your Social Security number, your state driver's license number. You have to sign it. Date of birth has to be correct. Name, full name has to be correct. And yes, those signatures get verified. So in Ohio, you have to prove your identity when you request a ballot, and you have to prove your identity again when you actually return an absentee ballot. And so we've got a secure way of requesting absentee ballots. Now, don't confuse that with in other states. They actually send out live ballots to people that didn't request them. That's a foolish idea, and we wouldn't do that. These are just forms. There's no, special status to form. It's also important for people to understand the history of this. Why do we do this? First of all, the state legislature funds it and requires that we do it. And it came out of something that happened about 10, 15 years ago, where only the big Democrat-leaning counties, the big urban counties, were sending out request forms to all of their voters, where the smaller rural and suburban counties were not. So it created a disparate situation that actually drove turnout for one party and not the other. The response to that was, we can't tell one county not to do it and another unless we do it statewide. And so now the state legislature funds these go out to every registered voter. If you don't want it, you can throw it away. If you do want it, you can fill it out and request your absentee ballot. It's just a matter of making it uniform across the state so that it doesn't have an impact that benefits one party over another.
In addition to the major elections, obviously the presidential election, the Senate race in Ohio, local congressional races, local state legislative races, all of the, I think 30, I'm not making this up, I think there are 30 levies on the ballot in Lucas County, something ridiculous like that. But one of the more controversial, confusing issues on the ballot, and obviously I'm not going to drag you into a political conversation about this, but explain the ballot language of issue 1, which would be an amendment to the Ohio Constitution changing Ohio's system for drawing political maps.
Well, to be clear, I personally am voting no on issue 1. I think it's an attempt at a power grab by the other party. It's also being funded by a group of out-of-state special interests, including a Swiss billionaire. Yes, from the country of Switzerland, like the little red pocket knife people. I don't know why a Swiss billionaire thinks that he should be able to influence how Ohioans draw their district lines. This thing is 13,000 words long. The constitutional amendment, 13,000 words long. Compare that to the U.S. Constitution in its entirety. The entire U.S. Constitution is 7,500 words. This thing is very complex. And so what we did as the ballot board, and I chair that, we write the language that appears on the ballot. We were very blunt and very honest about what this thing does. It takes and assigns a group of 15 unaccountable, unelected people, and it requires them to gerrymander the state to create a certain number of Democratic districts and a certain number of Republican districts. And that's what appears on the ballot. That language has been upheld by the Ohio Supreme Court. And so at least Ohioans will have the benefit of seeing that and understanding what this is they're being asked to vote for.
It codifies gerrymandering, which nobody likes. It actually makes that part of the state constitution.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have anything in it that would keep communities together. It doesn't have anything in it that would require compactness. And so you talk about these elongated, funny-shaped districts. That would become really a requirement in order to achieve this political outcome that issue one seeks to achieve, which is to, again, create a certain number of districts for each party. It's a cynical thing, too, because what it doesn't take into account is that it's really up to the voters. It's not up to some group of unelected bureaucrats to decide what the balance of power in the state General Assembly is going to be.
Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose on the Scott Sand Show. Early voting is underway. We've got less than 4 weeks until the election. Frank, where can people find out how to early vote? Where do they early vote right now? If you don't want to wait till Election Day, what's the process?
Yeah, 3 secure options: early voting, absentee voting, or Election Day voting. They're all secure. Just pick which one works best to you, for you. You can get all that information at voteohio.gov, but early voting continues for the next 4 weeks, including evening hours and weekend hours. Find your hours and your location at voteohio.gov. And if you haven't requested an absentee ballot yet, now's the time to do that. If that's how you choose to vote, you can also get that form. If you threw away the one I sent you, you can just print that form off at our website, voteohio.gov.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Have a great week. I'm sure we'll talk a lot between now and then.
Yes, sir. Thank you much. Take care.